I'm writing this to you as an ex-government employee, and technically, my government agency worked far more with the military, so I guess you can consider me ex-military. And I wanted to warn you about the many things going on that most civilians have no idea. I'm not talking about biological conspiracies like viruses and the such, although we've dabbled in that as well. But what I'm specifically talking about is the extensive creation and use of bioweaponry. I've been watching your YouTube channel for quite some time, and I could see that you've hit the nail on the head several times in relation to biological weapons and what these creatures really are. Well, I'm here to tell you that the lab I worked at, which I'm not going to exactly reveal since my life is dependent on it, but I'm here to tell you there is a huge cover-up going on to withhold this information from the public. Now, before I get into specifics, I would like to state why. Now, I'm not exactly told, but if you think about it, if this information were to get out, can you imagine the mass panic it would cause? Not to mention complete and total distrust in any government body. No, we can't have that. And besides, most civilians are stupid and will believe anything they are spoon-fed on the media. They are told what to think, how to feel, what to react to. Their entire belief system, from the ground up, from the day they are born, we help shape through what they show, see, and experience all around them in this matrix of the world. Before I get into more of the biological weaponry side, know this, that the military and the government, several different agencies, by the way, all work on biological weaponry. Everything from viruses to diseases, to more physical and practical uses. I'm talking about the need of super soldiers, physical and not. And before you ask, yes, many of us have dabbled into the occult to try and muster up supernatural beings in order to control. We've also gone as far as to work on human hybrids of any kind, human canine, human ape, anything you could think of. And horrifyingly, we've been successful at what we've done. The specific agency I worked for myself in helping craft these weapons, if you want to call them that, was what you civilians refer to as shadow government. We have, in the past, have worked with the CIA, the DEA, and several other well-known agencies of the government. But more importantly, we were contracted to do some of the most heinous, disturbing, and advanced bioweaponry. Also keep in mind, we were not the only branch doing this, just one of the many out there. One of the biggest things you've touched upon on your YouTube channel, that I'm sure many are aware of, is what you refer to as dogman. I cannot sit here and claim that we've created this species, but what I can tell you is that our agency has several similar kinds of soldiers currently in the works of being created and are already in the alpha testing phase, or at least they were before I was kindly let go. Generally, one of the first few tests we put our soldiers through to see if they are sufficient in killing is putting them out in the open field and seeing just what kind of carnage they could do. Sometimes we'll even go as far as releasing multiple at a time to create a pack and to even see if they can breed, which in the past has proven successful. There are many operations that have operated this way, and we continue to monitor the test subjects' progress as time goes on and how efficient they are at killing, strategizing, and overall survival. I'm going to tell you outright that a portion of all missing persons cases has something to do with our experiments. I can even tell you right now that we were working on a specific testing phase for several test subjects right around Taylor, Mississippi, up into Kentucky, all the way up through Ohio and Pennsylvania, conveniently all along the Appalachian Mountains. Listening this far, you're probably wondering why I'm still not exactly giving you every single detail and I am being somewhat vague. Well, that's simply because my name is everywhere in my agency, and if I give away too much information, well, I would easily be able to be tracked. Make of it what you will, make fun of me if you must, but I figured sharing this information with you, there shouldn't be an issue because no one's going to look here. Besides, most who listen to this will probably believe it to be bad fiction written by a novice. But if you do choose to believe, which I strongly advise you do, I want to warn you now, outright, that you should never go into the woods or any place that is heavily forested unarmed. Because, as I said, there's not just our test subjects out there. There is a continuous biological operation to further implement, test, and strengthen these weapons for the time when they are properly needed. That is to be yet determined. I know all of this might come off as crazy, but it's the truth. I've seen it with my very own eyes, and I've been working in it for years now. We've been doing this for a long time. Actually, to my knowledge, since the 1950s. And believe me, we are not the only ones. There are many other countries out there doing the same thing, notably China, Russia, Pakistan, Brazil, Venezuela, among a handful of others you probably had no idea. I'm talking heinous, horrible human experiments that does not ever reach the eyes or ears of the public. As a matter of fact, one of the divisions I worked for specifically back in 2016 was responsible of the creation of a brand new type of bioweaponry. While we were working with human hybrids of sorts, we were working on genetics, combining the best qualities of both humans and animals to create as I've stated before, a super soldier of types. This far supersedes just simply mixing an animal with a human. Say, for example, like your dogman or what other beings you've described in your previous episodes. I'm not even going to tell you the exact project code that we gave it, but I will say the word Invictus was in it. We were tasked with creating the perfect soldier. Again, I moved out of that project early 2017 when the experiment was still in its alpha stages. I have no idea what its further use will be. I have no idea what the future end of that project is, but by God, if civilians knew what was really going on, they would be completely terrified. I can tell you this, that if these beings ever see the light of day, they are strong, fast, completely irrational, violent, and are fully sentient and conscious. I wanted to try and wrap this up and extend it out into another email. I wanted to tell you about Project Purple. Now, Project Purple was a bioweapon program that was scrapped back in 2013, but was heavily worked on from 2011 until then. We very heavily utilized human DNA and splicing it with large cat DNA to create the perfect soldier with extraordinary capabilities at nocturnal hunting. Unfortunately, we ultimately made the decision to scrap it as the test subjects became far too advanced, too unstable, and incredibly violent. To say we had a few casualties is an understatement. I was there when we ran multiple tests. I saw them dispose of people without any regard of anything. They were like animals, pure, instinctual, and brutal, but also very intelligent. They could strategize. We could not control them. And many of them have been released into the Ozarks and the Smoky Mountain area. And to my recollection, we were, at the time, recently, still actively monitoring them. Why do you think when one is killed, our agents are dispatched to the scene almost immediately? Yes, we can view their vitals in real time and almost have a sort of direct link with the weapon. It's a shame that we had to scrap it because I think had our budget extend a little farther, we could have really pushed the program into something more to create the perfect soldier. I know that throughout this entire email, that's all I've been mentioning, but I want to tell you that we work on a variety of what we would call quote-unquote perfect soldier. We aim for some that can be used in all different terrains, battlefields, different missions, as well as other top secret tasks. If you do decide to read this to your audience, they can feel free to comment and ask anything they'd like, as well as you. I can't promise I'll get back to you in a timely manner, but I'll do the best I can, and for the time being, you could call me Jane. I guess I should also conclude as to why I'm doing this. What's my incentive? I guess whistleblowing, so to speak, is kind of a weight off my chest. I've seen things that no human eyes should ever see. Very dark, disturbing things. That's all for now, even if you only just read this. My hunting story takes place back in 2015 on an old off-grid property. This property has been in my family for many generations, and my grandfather and father before me have all been hunting on this property for a very long time. Now, we've never had stories like this happen before, at least that I was aware of, until these past few years. It seems like all this has just happened out of nowhere. And don't get me wrong, while I'm terrified to go back, I'm not going to let it permanently scare me off land that my family has been in possession of for all of these years. Now, the area in question, I have multiple tree stands set up, all on old growth timber. The area around is surrounded by miles and miles of dense woods in just about every direction. In fact, there's no one around for easily 40 plus miles. So, as you can imagine, the chances of what I experienced being somebody else are very low. The closest tree stand to where I parked my truck is roughly 0.8 of a mile. Now, I don't exactly mind the hike in, even though since springtime, the brush and thicket grows incredibly dense. So it's a bit of a ways in. Once I'd made it to my tree stand, I automatically noticed that something right off the bat was wrong. Normally, I'm greeted with all sorts of chittering and sounds of the forest around me, alive and full of life. But this time, everything was incredibly silent. You can hear a pin drop. I know that's probably one of the most cliche things you can say, but that's the best way to describe it. If you've ever been in the woods, or if you've hunted before, you would know that that means that there is a large predator in the area. So I had my guard up, just in case there might be a large black bear or maybe a mountain lion walking around. You never know. Oh, real quick before I go any further, this was right about 7 in the morning. So the sun was just creeping up, and it was late summer, early fall. I wasn't up there for more than 5 to 10 minutes before this horrible stink began filling my entire tree stand. And I wish I was better at descriptions because I can't even begin to describe or accurately describe the smell. It wasn't exactly garbage, it wasn't exactly rotting meat or blood or anything. It was just this undeniable, unrecognizable stink. I guess if I really had to put a face to it, I would say it smelled like you took a bunch of roadkill and threw it on a heaping pile of trash sitting out in the sun for about 5 days. And maybe a little bit of metal or iron in there, if that makes sense. Not quite blood, but just this stink. As I sat there in my tree stand over the next 30 minutes, this increasing feeling of dread continued to grow in my stomach. All the while, everything around me remained completely silent. I heard not a single sound. There was no bird, there was no squirrel, there was nothing. And finally, after about the 30-minute mark, give or take, I was so bothered by what I was feeling, I just felt like my entire body was screaming at me to get out of there. You are in grave danger. So I listened to my instincts and ultimately my body. I climbed out of the tree stand and began to head back on the path back to my truck. Not exactly sure why my body was reacting this way, but I wasn't about to be stupid. Clearly my senses were sensing something that I was not seeing. The entire time in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there must be one hell of a mountain lion or a massive bear really close by. Within maybe 60 seconds, definitely no more than a couple of minutes, I began hearing the sound of what I thought at the time was a massive bear following me in the woods, probably about to my 9 o'clock. And I could hear it. It was plain as day. I mean, it was massive. So I began to pick up my pace when, at one point, I decided to stop dead in my tracks to see if I can hear it. Now here is where my stomach completely drops, because the second that I decide to stop and stand still, what I thought was a bear now immediately stops. I thought to myself, that's odd. Generally, if it was a bear, it wouldn't do that. So I kept going, and it did the same thing. It followed me and would stop when I would stop. Now I'm beginning to get extremely fearful, because this clearly can't be a person just due to the sounds of it moving in the woods just out of sight sounded incredibly huge. I'm talking probably the size of a very large buck, possibly a moose or a massive bear. You could hear the weight of it moving. At the time, I couldn't exactly tell if it was on 2 legs or 4. This continues to happen for probably the next 0.3 of a mile until I decide to stop and crouch down and really intently listen. Now I could not hear anything around me, and I began to feel a little bit of relief because I thought, okay, maybe it was just in my head. Maybe I wasn't exactly hearing something following me off to my 9 o'clock, and even though the forest was still quiet, I continued to listen intently. And this is where things get really crazy, so bear with me. I start to see movement out of the right of my eye. Now remember, I'm crouched down on this game trail, listening intently to the woods around me for anything. And as I see this movement to the right of my eye, I kind of slowly look over, and I realize to my absolute terror that this is a massive, hairy, almost gorilla-looking like arm slowly reaching out of the woods towards my direction. In fact, it happened so quickly that my entire body just slowly shifted towards what I was looking at, and it was this massive 6-fingered hand on this hairy arm reaching out towards my direction ever so slowly. Due to the heavy thicket, I could not see, and fortunately or unfortunately, what it was attached to. I just saw the hand reach out with claws attached to it, mind you, try to reach out towards my direction, but I did not let it get close enough to me. I quickly stood up out of reaction, remained calm, even though I was terrified, and decided to take off running as fast as I could the remainder of the half-mile back to my truck. And I tell you what, I made it. But the entire way back, I felt like I was not only being followed, but I felt like as if I was being hunted by whatever that was. I was fortunate enough to make it back to my truck in time and leave the area without any further incidents, but the years since, I've experienced other strange things like it. Nothing as terrifying as that morning, but I've heard strange screams and what I would call calls and responses. Sounds that didn't make sense. But as I stated already to you, I refuse to let whatever boogeyman lives in those woods scare me out of property that has been in my family for a very long time. I will email you further if there's any updates. Wish me luck.